Key global developments February 2025, U.S.-Russia peace talks in Saudi Arabia, the Russia-Ukraine war, a history of conflict, escalation, and resilience. U.S. and Russia engage in high-level talks. One historic meeting held at Dia Palace in Riyadh between U.S. and Russian delegations. U.S. team, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. 4 main points of consensus reached: establishing mechanisms to address bilateral irritants, appointing teams to discuss Ukraine peace settlement, focusing on territory and security guarantees, cooperation in post-war Ukraine reconstruction, commitment to continued engagement, and potential Putin-Trump meeting. Ukraine's response and diplomatic moves. President Zelensky explicitly rejected any agreements made without Ukraine's participation. Seeking new allies and support. Visited UAE to discuss prisoner exchanges and economic cooperation. Met with Turkish President Erdogan to explore security guarantees and reconstruction support. European leaders held emergency summit in Paris but failed to reach consensus on increased defense spending proposals. Deployment of peacekeepers to Ukraine. Global events are unfolding rapidly, with significant implications across various sectors. Here's a summary of recent developments. International relations and conflict. Ukraine war. Negotiations between the U.S. and Russia and Saudi Arabia signal a potential shift in the Ukraine conflict. While Ukraine wasn't present at these talks, the discussions focused on ending the war, including territory, security, guarantees, and post-war cooperation. However, Ukraine has stated they won't accept any deal made without their involvement. Europe, seemingly sidelined in these developments, held its own summit to discuss increased defense spending and potential peacekeeping efforts. Though disagreements emerged, Zelensky has been actively seeking support from other nations like the UAE and Turkey, focusing on financial aid, military assistance, and mediation. U.S.-Russia peace talks in Saudi Arabia. Historic meeting held at Dia Palace in Riyadh between U.S. and Russian delegations. U.S. team led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. 4 main points of consensus reached. 1. Establishing mechanisms to address bilateral irritants. 2. Appointing teams to discuss Ukraine peace settlement, focusing on territory and security guarantees. 3. Cooperation in post-war Ukraine reconstruction. 4. Commitment to continued engagement and potential Putin-Trump meeting. Ukraine's response and diplomatic moves. President Zelensky explicitly rejected any agreements made without Ukraine's participation. Seeking new allies and support, visited UAE to discuss prisoner exchanges and economic cooperation. Met with Turkish President Erdogan to explore security guarantees and reconstruction support. European leaders held emergency summit in Paris, but failed to reach consensus on increased defense spending proposals, deployment of peacekeepers to Ukraine. In a significant diplomatic development, the United States and Russia held high-level talks in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, this week. 2. This marks the most substantial engagement between the two nations since the onset of the Ukraine war in 2022. 3. Focus on ending the Ukraine war. The primary objective of these discussions was to explore avenues for ending the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. 4. Both sides expressed a desire for a peaceful resolution and agreed to establish a mechanism for future communication and negotiation. 5 key points of discussion. Territorial concessions. The possibility of Ukraine ceding some territory to Russia was likely a point of contention. Security guarantees. Discussions revolved around ensuring Ukraine's security in any post-conflict scenario. 6. Post-war cooperation. The U.S. and Russia explored potential areas of collaboration in the reconstruction of Ukraine. Ukraine, S. perspective, Ukraine was not directly involved in these talks, raising concerns about the potential for decisions being made without their input. 7. President Zelensky has reiterated that Ukraine will not accept any agreement reached behind their backs. European concerns. European nations also expressed unease about being excluded from these crucial discussions. They held their own summit in Paris to discuss the implications of the US-Russia talks and to formulate a unified European strategy. 8. Potential outcomes. De-escalation of the conflict. The talks could pave the way for a ceasefire and eventual peace agreement, shifting geopolitical landscape. The engagement between the US and Russia signals a potential realignment of global powers and a shift in the dynamics of the Ukraine war. Uncertainty for Ukraine and Europe. The exclusion of Ukraine and European nations from the talks creates uncertainty about their roles in the future of the conflict and its resolution. 10. Looking ahead. The US-Russia talks in Saudi Arabia represent a pivotal moment in the Ukraine war. While the specific outcomes remain to be seen, this development has the potential to reshape the conflict and its global implications. The coming weeks will be crucial in determining the extent to which these talks translate into concrete actions and a path towards peace. Analysis of hypothetical US-Russia peace talks in Saudi Arabia, February 2025. Context and background. By February 2025, the protracted conflict in Ukraine remains unresolved, prompting Saudi Arabia, leveraging its growing diplomatic clout under Vision 2030, to mediate high-stakes talks between the US and Russia. This initiative aligns with Saudi efforts to diversify its global influence beyond oil, following its role in earlier Ukraine negotiations, and the 2023 China-brokered Iran-Saudi détente. Key discussion points. 1. Ukraine ceasefire proposal. A tentative agreement aims to halt hostilities, contingent on phased withdrawals and security guarantees. The plan faces hurdles, including territorial disputes, for example, Crimea, Donbass, and Ukraine's exclusion from direct talks, raising concerns over sovereignty. 2. Strategic arms control. With New START expired, both nations explore a new framework addressing emerging technologies, for example, AI-driven systems, hypersonic missiles. Mutual inspections and data sharing are proposed, though mistrust over compliance persists. 3. Energy and economic cooperation. Sanctions relief for Russia is floated in exchange for energy market stabilization, appealing to Europe's winter needs and U.S. economic interests. Saudi Arabia seeks to balance OPEC plus dynamics with its renewable energy investments. 4. Humanitarian corridors. Immediate focus on aid delivery to conflict zones, leveraging UN Red Cross channels. This serves as a confidence-building measure amid broader political stalemates. Geopolitical implications. Saudi Arabia's rise ***. Success here cements *its role as a neutral mediator, enhancing its soft power amid US-China rivalry. NATO/EU divisions ***. European leaders express skepticism, fearing US unilateralism and potential concessions undermining Ukrainian sovereignty. Poland and the Baltics advocate for tougher conditions. Global markets ***. Oil prices dip on ceasefire prospects, offering inflation relief but risking volatility if talks stall. Challenges and criticisms. Trust deficits ***. Historical grievances, for example, Crimea annexation, election interference, hinder progress. Russia demands binding sanctions relief, while the U.S. insists on irreversible military rollbacks. Ukrainian resistance ***. President Zelensky condemns the talks as appeasement, mobilizing global South support to demand inclusion. Domestic politics ***. U.S. bipartisan pressure from hawks and progressives complicates Biden's or a successor's leverage. Putin faces hardliner pushback against perceived concessions. Future outlook. While the talks mark a rare diplomatic opening, success hinges on inclusive negotiations, incorporating Ukraine and EU stakeholders to avoid fragmentation. Verification mechanisms, robust arms control and ceasefire monitoring, potentially involving third parties like the IEA. Economic incentives, linking sanctions relief to Russia's adherence with Saudi/OPEC plus guarantees on energy flows. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has deep historical roots, with tensions escalating dramatically in recent years. This analysis delves into the origins, developments, and political ramifications of the war up to February 19, 2025. Historical context. Ukraine's strategic position has made it a focal point for regional powers. In 1708, during the Great Northern War, Russia secured control over eastern Ukraine, establishing a long-standing influence in the AE region. Prelude to the 2022 invasion, the modern conflict traces back to November 2013, when Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych's decision to abandon an association agreement with the European Union sparked the Euromaidan protests. This movement led to Yanukovych's ousting in February 2014. Subsequently, Russia annexed Crimea in March 2014, a move widely condemned internationally. The same year saw the emergence of pro-Russian separatist movements in Ukraine's Donetsk and Luhansk regions, leading to prolonged clashes. The 2022 full-scale invasion. In late 2021, Russia amassed approximately 92,000 troops near the Ukrainian border, raising global concerns. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, marking a significant escalation. The initial phase targeted major cities, including Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Mariupol. Despite expectations of a swift victory, Russian forces encountered formidable Ukrainian resistance, leading to a protracted conflict. Key developments and turning points. Spring 2022. Ukrainian forces successfully defended Kyiv, forcing Russian troops to retreat from the northern front. Summer 2022. Intense battles raged in the Donbas region, with cities like Severodonetsk and Lysychansk changing hands. September 2022. A Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Kharkiv region reclaimed significant territory, showcasing effective use of Western-supplied weaponry. November 2022, Ukrainian troops liberated Kherson, the only regional capital Russia had captured since the invasion began. 2023. The conflict settled into a war of attrition, with both sides engaging in artillery duels and limited offensives. Russia fortified its positions in the east and south, while Ukraine sought to disrupt supply lines and logistics, political dimensions, and international response. The invasion prompted a unified response from Western nations, leading to unprecedented economic sanctions against Russia. NATO reinforced its eastern flank, and countries like Finland and Sweden applied for membership, signaling a shift in European security dynamics. Diplomatic efforts have been fraught with challenges. In February 2025, high-stakes peace talks commenced in Saudi Arabia between the U.S. and Russia, notably excluding Ukraine from initial discussions. The U.S. aimed for a swift ceasefire, while Russia sought significant concessions, including recognition of its annexation of 4 Ukrainian provinces. Ukraine's exclusion sparked outrage in Kyiv, with President Volodymyr Zelensky asserting that Ukraine would never accept Russia's ultimatums and criticizing negotiations held without Ukrainian involvement. Current status and future outlook. As of February 19, 2025, the war remains unresolved. The front lines have largely stagnated, with neither side achieving a decisive breakthrough. The humanitarian toll is immense, with millions displaced and significant infrastructure destruction. Politically, the conflict has reshaped global alliances. Russia's relations with Western nations are at a historic low, while its ties with countries like China and North Korea have strengthened. The U.S. and its allies continue to support Ukraine, but debates persist over the extent and nature of this assistance. In summary, the Russia-Ukraine war is a complex conflict with deep historical roots and significant geopolitical implications. Its resolution remains uncertain, contingent on both developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Russia-Ukraine war is a complex and tragic conflict with deep historical roots and far-reaching global implications. 1. It's not simply a war that began in 2022, but rather an escalation of a long-standing struggle between the two nations. 2. To understand the current situation, we need to delve into the history of this conflict, analyzing its development, twists, progress, and setbacks from both a historical and political perspective. Historical context: a tangled past. Ukraine and Russia share centuries of intertwined history, marked by periods of cooperation and conflict. 3. Shared origins. Both nations trace their origins to the medieval state of Kievan Rus, fostering a sense of shared cultural and religious heritage. 4. Diverging paths. Over time, Ukraine and Russia developed distinct identities, with Ukraine seeking to assert its own language, culture, and political independence. 5. Russian domination. For centuries, much of Ukraine was under Russian rule, leading to periods of Russification and suppression of Ukrainian identity. 6. Soviet era. During the Soviet era, Ukraine became a republic within the USSR. 7. However, the Holodomor, a man-made famine in the 1930s, caused widespread death and suffering in Ukraine, leaving a legacy of distrust towards Moscow. 8. Independence. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine declared its independence, a move that was initially recognized by Russia. 9. The seeds of conflict, post-Soviet tensions. Despite initial recognition, tensions between Russia and Ukraine persisted in the post-Soviet era. 1. Geopolitical orientation. Ukraine sought closer ties with the West, including potential membership in NATO and the European Union, while Russia aimed to maintain its influence in the region. 11. Naval base in Crimea. Russia maintained a naval base in Sevastopol, Crimea, a region with a majority Russian population. 12. Energy dependence. Ukraine remained heavily reliant on Russia for energy supplies, giving Moscow leverage over its neighbor. 13. The 2014 annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbass. In 2014, following a pro-Russian revolution in Ukraine that ousted President Viktor Yanukovych, Russia annexed Crimea. 14. This marked a significant escalation in tensions and a turning point in the relationship between the two countries. Annexation of Crimea. Russia justified the annexation by claiming it was protecting the rights of ethnic Russians in Crimea. However, the move was widely condemned by the international community as a violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity. 15. War in Donbass. Following the annexation of Crimea, a conflict erupted in eastern Ukraine's Donbass region, with Russian-backed separatists fighting against Ukrainian forces. This war has continued for 8 years, claiming thousands of lives and displacing millions. 16. The 2022 full-scale invasion. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, marking a dramatic escalation of the conflict. 17. Russian objectives. Russia's stated objectives included demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, as well as preventing Ukraine from joining NATO. 18. However, many believe that Russia's true goal is to bring Ukraine back under its control. Ukrainian resistance. Despite initial setbacks, the Ukrainian military and civilian population have put up fierce resistance against the Russian invasion. 19. International response. The international community has responded to the invasion with widespread condemnation and sanctions against Russia. 20. Developments, twists, progress, and setbacks. The war has been marked by a series of developments, twists, progress, and setbacks for both sides. Initial Russian advances. In the early stages of the Ukraine invasion, Russian forces made significant gains, advancing towards Kiev and other major Ukrainian cities. 21. Ukrainian counteroffensives. However, Ukrainian forces launched successful counteroffensives, pushing back the Russian army and reclaiming significant territory. 22. Shifting focus. Russia has shifted its focus to eastern and southern Ukraine, where it has made some gains. 23. Ongoing conflict. The war is now concentrated in eastern and southern Ukraine, with both sides engaged in intense fighting. 24. Humanitarian crisis. The war has caused a devastating humanitarian crisis, with millions of Ukrainians displaced and many cities reduced to rubble. 25. Analysis from a historical and political perspective. From a historical perspective, the Russia-Ukraine war can be seen as a continuation of the long-standing struggle between the two nations for identity, independence, and geopolitical influence. Russia's actions can be interpreted as an attempt to reverse the post-Soviet shift in the balance of power and to reassert its dominance in the region. 26. From a political perspective, the war is a complex geopolitical struggle with multiple actors and competing interests. 27. Russia's invasion has been met with strong resistance from Ukraine and widespread condemnation from the international community. 28. The war has also highlighted the divisions within the international system, with some countries supporting Russia and others siding with Ukraine. 29. The future of the conflict. The future of the Russia-Ukraine war remains uncertain. While negotiations between the two sides have taken place, a lasting peace agreement seems elusive. 30. The war has already had a profound impact on Ukraine, Russia, and the global order. 31. It has caused a humanitarian crisis, disrupted global supply chains, and led to a renewed arms race. 32. The long-term consequences of the war are likely to be felt for years to come. Conclusion. The Russia-Ukraine war is a complex and tragic conflict with deep historical roots and far-reaching global implications. It's a war that has been marked by escalation, resistance, setbacks, and a humanitarian crisis. 33. From a historical and political perspective, it's a struggle for identity, independence, and geopolitical influence. The future of the conflict remains uncertain, but its impact on the region and the world is undeniable. The Riyadh talks reflect a multipolar world where middle powers like Saudi Arabia broker deals among superpowers, however without addressing core issues of territorial integrity and mutual accountability. The bar agreement risks becoming a temporary fix rather than a lasting peace. The window for diplomacy remains open, but fragile, with global stability hanging in the balance.